Alrighty, hello there. Don't mind the trucks going by outside. We are here to do a coding stream, and this is liable to be a final coding stream for YouTube. Let me switch stuff around a little bit so that I can set myself up with the kind of visual feedback I would prefer. There we go. So what we're going to do is code ZBandpass2, and this is similar to previous stuff I've been coding in previous weeks. And while we're doing this, I will talk with you about where we're going with this streaming thing and so on, because like I said, I am seriously thinking about moving over to Twitch for the purposes of doing this and for the purposes of doing more music production stuff. I've had some insight recently into what could be going on there. So why don't we just start up with, and when I am doing the music production stuff, I've got a number of things that I'm going to try out, including my studio recording, and if I can do stuff with that synthesizer as it evolves and progresses. You can see there's a filter sitting on top of it that I still haven't brought into the system, but I'll be getting that stuff together. However, today is all about doing some coding, because that's what we do on Mondays. There's actually a kind of nice thing to be learned from that, which is if you're fixing to do things, it's pretty important to sit down and start doing them. That sounds like a very trivial observation, but that's kind of what makes things happen, really. Let me also test that I've got my audio set up. Soon enough, I'll be able to bring a better audio clip on, because I was just doing that. In fact, maybe that would be fun to do today. Let me put this down for a moment. Hey there, unknown. So what I'm going to do here is go into, hang on, let me see now. I'm juggling stuff around a little bit because I have a FLAC file I want to bring over to this other computer. It's 349 megs, so it's going to take me a bit, but I should be able to substantially outdo this reference drum thing that I've been using forever, because this is what I was working on the other day, and I'll be happy to show you. It'll just take a moment, and then I'll bring all of my other things. I don't know whether OBS is still behaving itself or not, but I need to transfer this over. Yep, looks like we're still good. It's going to be interesting to transfer over to Twitch. Honestly, the feeling that I get from that is that platform is all about hanging out with people while they do stuff. And since that's basically what I'm doing, it seems appropriate. But for now, let's see. Oh, and I had better turn my Wi-Fi off before I launch anything, just in case there's stuff that might be, and we'll quit that. So as you can see, the file that I made is called Amen Loop Sessions FLAC. And I'm pretty sure this older version of Twisted Waves will still be able to open it. We'll find out. If not, I'll have a little more tinkering to do. And also I could have done with emptying that, although frankly I could be bringing it over to my other computer as well, and that would kind of make sense, so maybe I missed a trick there, but yep, it is showing up with the same icon as Twisted Wave, meaning that I assume it's going to open up just fine. And here was the previous thing we were listening to, which is the old drum. It's just 2 tracks out of a Logic session. But if I open this, it's a little bit longer. It's also 96K. And this is the result of a project that I have done just recently. What's going on there is I set up the classic Amen break, which it turns out it's like, what, about 120 beats per minute? I worked that out at one point. So my deal in Bespoke was that I had set it up Bespoke to have an automated system where I could switch among breakbeat sections. I had the Amen break broken into a set of slices by time rather than by beat, because I wanted to maintain the flow of the original groove. And I've been working with some breakbeat stuff on the back of that. Now that's all very interesting. But the thing about it is that's still the Winston's drummer who passed on and never really got anything out of that. And it's also not a modern recording. It's a very old school recording. And everything that I do with music and drums and stuff is attempting to get some of the classic things out of the classic recordings rather than very 80s and 90s drum sounds, but to maximize on that rather than remain stuck on only what was available back in the day. So what we've had here is On Into the Night drums, which is to some extent my new setup, but there's a lack in there because that's just the 2 side recordings I've got. I have a mic on the left and a mic on the right of the drum kit, and my innovation there is figuring out ways that I can mic a lot of the drum stuff from the side rather than literally on top or underneath or multi-miking. It's a bit of a variation on your classic Glyn Johns technique. One of the things I found is I have a very strongly panned hi-hat doing it this way. Got a lot of heavy stereo. And I'm fairly satisfied with the positioning of everything. But although you can hear the kick drum here, this is still just 2 mics. And the way that I record this normally, there are more than 2 mics. There's a kick drum mic, which I've got behind the drum stool. And when you do that, that is also hearing the snare drum side on, except for that your body is shielding it to some extent. So I've calculated that on purpose, and it gets a more clear shot at the lower tom-tom, which also helps position the lower tom-tom and give it some more size. And then I've also got a hallway microphone that is what you're hearing here is a API pre, and that has very good noise performance. It's one of the correct pre's for professional recording. The other is Neve. And if you combine that with a Rode MT1, I think it's MT, not NT, then you can produce a microphone setup where literally the microphone that you're using and the preamplifier that you're using are effectively noiseless. And that means you can crank it up all the way and talk from somewhere else in the house and pick up the sound in its full reverby quality without any significant noise. That's because the pre and the microphone are extremely low noise. And so I've got the Rode for that purpose. Its only purpose is to be able to produce sound with next to no noise in there, and it's one of the highest performing ones you can get that way. That's why I picked it. And then when you combine those things, you get something more like this. So what I've done here is I've got those stereo microphones as before, but then I have the low frequency microphone. That's the kick drum microphone. Is also a Roswell Mini K47 for these main mics. And as such, now there's the kick drum mic in there. I think you can plainly hear the difference between this, which is clear enough, but it's not big. It's not big like a full drum sound. With this, which is clear enough, but also heavy and big. And I'm not really using EQs on the mics, but I am doing something with it. This is using that kick drum mic as the third microphone in the configuration. And that's how I'm getting the balance of drums and things. Here, let me move my windows around a little bit so I can see what my volume levels are doing. And I've got the kick drum microphone reinforcing the kick. And then I've also got that hallway microphone hearing the drum room through a closed door. And there's just a little bit of it expanding the sort of reverberation around the drums. Otherwise, it'd be a lot drier. And I need to fill it out in that way. So it is acoustic reverb. It's acoustic ambience coming out of a hallway where all the doors are kind of closed up. So it just echoes, but it doesn't have the brightness that you'd get from if the door was open. The Rode MT1 is what's making it so that you can get the sound out of a much greatly turned down result. And then I'm also taking the that reverb sound and running it into an aux, and the aux is going into my Holt plugin, and there's a sample delay on the drums. There's a sample delay on the hall ambience. And then there's another sample delay on the aux from the hall ambience, which goes to Holt, which is set up to just be an enormous low frequency boost. So this lends some of the rumble off of the kick drum, which you can probably hear just fine. There is some weight from this setup. And what I did for the drumming of it is I set up the amen break to just play. And then I just tried to lay down a solid beat along with the amen break for the purpose. Oh, I just went back to where I started. That's unfortunate. Well, let's find an appropriate spot, and then it went back to the, okay, this older version of Twisted Wave is not helping me with this. That's fine. I'll do something else. I will find a spot like this and see what I get out of looping that. Because the idea of this exercise let's loop it around the snare. That's not going to work. So basically the idea of this recording is I needed a better sounding drum loop source. So what you do is you pick out stuff like that might be a place where you'd get a fill. This old version of Twisted Wave is, oh no, hang on, I guess it is after all. You pick out different things and try to make a loop. There's a loop. It's a loop with a fill in it, but it's a loop. Or if we ignore this bit where it's just a bunch of stupid nonsense, and find some place where I'm playing a little steadier. There's a little groove. You could make a loop like this, and it's got those low frequencies going on, where combining this with some other loops and things would give you something you could work with in, say, Bespoke. And the nice thing about that is, in Twisted Wave, certainly with the new version, but also with this old version, we can just make new document with the selection. And if we just save that to the desktop, we could drag it onto the interface in Bespoke and start using it as a drum pad. So the way of working with this is rather quick, so much so that I feel kind of like the best way of me going forward with this stuff is to not attempt to be doing all this work in advance, but very much stick to things like, say, this. Oh, you beast, you're not letting me move the attack. Oh, now you are. See, Twisted Wave is a nice little program. It does have its points. And so if I copy that, that's one of the things that I think I would actually be keeping and using, is the ability to new document selection here's a crash I can overlay onto things. So I could have that drum loop going on and then be hitting this crash at the same time, or have it built into my bespoke setup so that I could pick out different crashes and things using the bespoke techniques. And since they're recorded out of the same session, they'll blend. It's a very aggressive crash, so I might want to do something like a gentler crash. Or here's, like if I had a drum loop going on, I think that this will let me play all of the things at the same time. But I'd better copy this out to the new document. And then, basically what you'd be doing, there's a nice basic drum loop. And here's how you work with loop and stuff. Turns out if I select that, and you can see that with these drum recordings, here's something that you can plainly see that I made a point of trying to do. You can see that my kick drum hits in front of the hat. That's something that exists in like classic. In fact, the whole thing might be, I've tried to learn from Ringo Starr on this. You make a beat, and you do not set your hi-hat as far forward as you can get it, unless you're maybe a ska musician or something. But what you do is you've got it so that the kick drum hits sooner than the hat, and that drives the beat. You want your low frequencies to maybe hit in front of the high frequencies. If the low frequencies lag the high frequencies, everything's going to sound a little slow and chuggy. And now let us new document with selection this, and the idea is you should be able to play this and then also overlay the crash. And it's not going to be in time. But if we do this, we have the powerful backbeat going. And you overlay the crash, and it sounds as if it's actually being played as part of the groove. Let's see where it gets to. It's a little quick. And so you do it kind of like that, but with bespoke. Actually, that's too strong of a beat. And that's what I was working on recently, is the big heavy drum beat. Because you know, if you've got this, you can do odd time signatures by just following where the beats land. because you have a reference point, and you can also trigger it in different ways. So that's a weird groove. Here's another one. And anytime you can trigger stuff like this in interesting ways, you can make a powerful drum groove that can be a completely weird odd time groove. But it's going to be a strong rhythm. Because it's based on a solid rhythm. And then the trick with that is you can also hang on, I did that wrong. Let's see whether we can make this poor little old computer do this. We are not going to resample. If we want faster things, I have a system set up in Bespoke. Here, it's such a strong groove that it's distorting. I have a system set up in Bespoke that automatically respeeds everything according to what the tempo is supposed to be. So you start out with this, and then let's say you want to be breakbeat guy. So you want to do something much faster. What you do is in Bespoke you load up this sample and then run the script that I generated, which speeds it to something much faster. And then you have your jungle thing. And by the way, it's interesting how this antique MacBook Pro on Snow Leopard is still able to play back 156K things over the 96K that the overall system is doing. You can do a lot with older gear. I'm still supporting that as much as I can. Or, of course, you can do the opposite. And I'll have individual hits from this sampling session, so I can use those as isolated kicks and snares and things. But the flip side of it is you can also do slower chill kind of stuff, and rather than speeding stuff up into jungle, you slow stuff down into like trip hop kind of stuff, where here's this groove going even slower than that. And then you do the same stuff with like weird little samples. And now we have a waltz. But this is from a 96K sampling session with really high quality recording. So we actually have a fairly wide range. This is not like a bit crush vaporwave. This is a more natural organic sounding hugeness. And you can make stuff out of that, or you can overlay it onto other tracks or other tracks at other tempos. Or we can do an odd time by selecting a cutoff point that's about halfway between those two positions. And it comes from a sampling session that is like that. So these are the kinds of things that I do, and like I've said, we're doing a coding stream today, but I am looking to move more of this over to Twitch for the live streaming for the purpose of doing more of this on stream. Like all the work that I was doing to get that drum track. Although I don't have a camera up in my drum room at the moment, a lot of that stuff could have been streamed. I just wasn't used to doing it with YouTube, and YouTube, I think, likes you better if you're doing coherent things or editing together stuff. And there will be things that I can come up with for that purpose. But I'm warming to the idea of getting into a more regular streaming schedule, because one of the things about it is, like, and this is something I was thinking about the other day, because I was working out how I can more effectively get into doing creative work on a more regular basis, and that is mostly about sitting down and doing it, much like I do with these coding streams, and we'll start that up now, I suppose, assuming everything works for me properly. And then we'll open up ZBandpass2 and do a new project, which will be ZBandpass2. This is true. I have gotten a phone that would be able to support stuff. I think my question is whether I want to use the phone and phone tripod and stuff for more like vlogging things, because I've been really wanting to learn more about editing videos together. All of my stuff, including the plugin posting, has been very much in the spirit of live streaming. Like the plugin posting is also basically a live performance. It just happens to go to a file at a higher bit rate, and then I upload that. And yeah, like Tommy, that's a very interesting insight there, because what struck me about it is in my last couple of, I think it was actually ZBandpass2 and then now ZBandpass2. When I sat down to do ZBandpass2, and maybe something else that people will enjoy on Twitch is the fact that if I'm not pounding lots of coffee, the way I think about things can be rather slow and geriatric. And maybe there will be people who enjoy just the vibe of that. I've been told a number of times that it's like, oh, I could just listen to you talk. And, if that soothes people, then that's awesome. Cool. I'll do that. But when I sat down to do the ZBandpass2 plugin video, I had a number of things set up, and one of them was the bespoke system where I was able to do a beat. I knew that I could pick a kick drum sound and a snare sound and so on, and I could go, all right, I can make a beat out of this. That's pretty straightforward. And I was working on integrating synthesizers, but I knew that I could use MIDI and record in a loop and then pump it out to the synths and capture those back in and get a good sound out of it. And I did those things, and I didn't really overthink it. I wasn't being creative so much as I was just walking through stuff, going like, okay, this is a way to make a decent sounding groove. And it was there were things about it that were a little questionable. But on the whole, I knew what I was trying to demonstrate. And I was doing the obvious stuff. I wasn't being super creative about it. And I got one of the better sounding jams I've had in quite a while. And when I sat down to do the jam for ZBandpass2, I had just done those drum recordings, and so I was going to bring that in, and I didn't feel as if I had time to go and do the synths over again. And as a result, I didn't think the music for that one was nearly as good, and it was getting back into that repetition stuff again, where I was doing the same thing over again. And the reason was not because I had not been creative, but because I was changing and bringing new things in, and it was taking away time that I could spend making the basically simple right choices behind doing good music again. In essence, when I'm doing my stuff like coding or doing work on the backgrounds for stuff, that's useful, but it won't give me good music. Every time I sit down and try to get really creative, that's building tools for doing good music. And only when I sit down and decide I'm just going to do something that is good and listenable music and it's fine, only then do I get results that are like good results. And that's an interesting observation. That is something, let's go and start doing this stuff while we're at it. I know ZBandpass was ZBAP, so it becomes ZBandpass2 because the version 2 increments the last letter by 1. And that's my convention for that. As far as that's concerned, I'm kind of a mind to continue coding streams, but I'm not sure I want to do coding streams on YouTube. I feel like the time that this takes, just the way in which, like, if I do a lot of, Tommy, I just did something like that with that drum sample that here. We'll fire this back up again. Does this sound like it has a subkick in it? Because the thing about this is, what I don't have a subkick, but what I have is, oh my god, it did a very high bit rate for a moment. But what I have is a whole microphone, an ambient microphone, and I bust that to a aux and I put Holt on it. So in essence, I already have the subkick plugin that you want. Use Holt. Take your room mic or your kick drum mic, anything like that you want to, and bus it to an aux, and put Hold on the aux and turn the frequency down all the way, start turning the resonance up, start turning the filter up. Here, I'll even demonstrate it. Check this out. So if you want your Yamaha subkick behavior, you want to do something like this. And this is also what I'll be doing on like Twitch, if I'm doing coding streams on Twitch. You know, I think that maybe people who are willing to sit down for a long hangout with somebody while they talk you through things is going to be greater on Twitch. Here, I'm about to demonstrate it for you. So here's Hold. If we turn these things up, and you should be able to hear that, I think. There's your Yamaha subkick element. And that's what the Yamaha subkick style sound would be like. We can also do it this way. And you can voice it with frequency. You can voice it with resonance and poles. Excuse me. And we can also take the resonance way down and move the frequency up. And that's also going to be very subkicky. You know, just pick the way that you want it to resonate, and it should do a pretty nice job of it. And that is what I'm using on this raw track. It's definitely a go-to plugin for this. I didn't realize until I revisited again, and then I realized this is the one for that purpose. So there you go, really. It also does a pretty good job of giving you a higher voicing like this. And high pole setting is going to give you a more dramatic effect. So there you go. There's your subkick. I should change the what.text to incorporate that, because it's doing such a good job at it. Let's quit out of there, and I'll do well, no, that's not on this computer, is it? Oh, never mind. I'll try to remember doing that. So now we're going to go and do this stuff again. Because for at least a couple of more live streams, we're going to be doing these very basic regular things here of filling that in, filling this in, because that also has its merits. You know, it's possible if things go a certain way, I might end up doing more coding streams on Twitch, but actually game coding, because I've learned a little bit about the Godot engine, which is getting better and better, and that's another nice little open source project that could be worth. There are many things that could be done if I'm in a context that is more permissible for just derping around for 5 or 6 hours and taking breaks to go and make a cup of coffee and not really having to be, you know, on YouTube. I generally feel as if I kind of need to keep up a pace. And we didn't get anywhere near the goal for SP1200, Jess. That's one of the things I'm going to be talking about, because heading into 2022, I'm going to make some changes, and one of the changes is that, like, the goal for the SP1200 and the way that I was going about it seems to be hurting rather than helping. Like, telling people that raising above a certain amount per month seems to just draw their attention to the fact that I'm, like, making more money from doing this than they're making money from Walmart or whatever, and that puts people off, which I completely understand. So as a result, like, displaying the Patreon income and explaining that everything beyond this certain amount is going towards this project is just only putting people off. It's like telling them this is not necessary, this is superfluous. And that's not really technically true, but it's the messaging is something that I'm learning is hurting me rather than helping me. And the SP1200 is a very high bar to reach. Like, I have 2 lower bars that might be more appropriate. One of them is I would like Console 8 to be the Mackie 8 bus. I have some ideas I'm exploring based around how the ultrasonic plugin and the Console 7 Cascade plugin works, where I should be able to get an overall system that requires the use of submixes, that requires the use of AUXes and buses. And it'll be more cumbersome to set up and probably have a variety of different things going on with it. But you'd be able to do the Mackie 8 bus thing of, like, patching channels into other channels and doing all that crazy D&V stuff. And I'm warming to the idea of doing that, and I already have the gear money saved up to be able to afford one as soon as one shows up that can ship. Because they all seem to show up, like, on Reverb and say, like, pickup only. Nobody's willing to ship them, they're too big. And one was shippable, but it didn't have the power supply. So that's something I'm going to be looking into. I'm going to be looking into getting a Mackie 8 bus, which I can currently afford to get, and then studying the heck out of that. No, I don't have Console 8 yet. Console 8, like I said, I think that's the one where I should do the model of the Mackie 8 bus and have a much more complicated configuration and set that one up that way. It'll follow the same rules as Console 7, but it'll be more complicated to set up. So that's the plan. And the other plan is, rather than fixating on the SP1200, which could be a longer term goal, I'm almost to the point, especially if I don't actually go for the Mackie 8 bus, that I could do that ASR 10. And I looked into Daydream Sounds YouTube videos on the ASR 10, and I am in fact quite impressed with how nice it sounds. It's a 16-bit thing, and it has its own little characteristics to it. And I imagined that it would be about repitching, or I could probably do something where you could model what happens when you sample something in and then repitch it, but as a if you were sampling something in at a particular rate, but you speeded up the sound sampling it and then slowed it down, and then the pitch was the same but the whole tone was changed, I could probably do that. And that would be ASR 10 rather than SB1200. SB1200 is worth like 3 ASR 10s. So that's the thing. I'm going to be making a post to the Patreon before December is out, announcing some of this stuff and explaining how, like, fixating on the SB1200 goal, I don't think that's going to take an awful long time. And the process of getting ready to try to push for that seems to be putting people off. I don't like it. So I might very well be of a mind to go for console 8 being the Mackie 8 bus. And then the goal beyond that would be the ASR 10. And then beyond that, we'll see. Like, I'll keep people posted as to how well stuff is going, but it's becoming very clear that I can't set a goal of, like, I will earn this much, and beyond this threshold, I will devote all the money to getting gear that I can model. People ask me for that, but then I don't think anybody actually wants to see me doing it or think about it. It's a little bit like the Hasanabi problem, where you're like a big fancy political streamer or something like that, and then you're buying a house somewhere and people are like, you call yourself a leftist? What I do is make these plugins that people can have for free. And the Patreon is for anybody who can afford to support the work that I'm doing. And I think you see it in the stuff that, like, here's ZBandpass2. I'm putting this one together. I'll keep moving on this. Let's not fall to a complete halt here. And this is about the fact that I got a sampler, the EMU E6400 sampler, and I've been trying to do the sound of that sampler as plugins with some success. I should be able to keep doing that, but tying it to, like, income seems to put people off. So I'm going to have to be a little bit, I'll still tell you if you ask, but I'm going to have to be a little bit more vague about what the Patreon's doing and just lean on the results. Lean on the products of continuing to make the plugins, doing streaming where I demonstrate stuff or study things or explore stuff. I will not have a Kickstarter because I'm doing it all through Patreon. That said, I can think of stuff that could use a Kickstarter, but it's not really what we're talking about here. Oh, and here is the fix that I put into ZLowPass. The original ZLowPass did not have this line of code here, and it needs it. So if you downloaded the first ZLowPass and you want to be sure that nothing ever goes wrong with it, then download the update. Like, re-download it, and all of the versions of it will have this as an update now. And they define wet A and wet B, so it can't ever start as a ridiculous nonsense number. And here we go with this. And this should give us a clone of ZLowPass if everything went well. Oh, I want to do an experiment. Check this out. I've been talking all this time about it's probably doing these in order, meaning that it needs to compile these in a particular order. Let's find out what happens. Oh, what happens is it's getting all twitchy on me. That's no good. So I think it's compiling these from top down, and it needs to compile that, and then it needs to compile this, and only then does it get to this stuff. And when it gets here, if it's doing this and hasn't compiled these yet, it has errors. Let's find out whether moving that folder to the bottom of this list causes it to not have immediate errors. I'm going to say no, we're still having a problem. Maybe because public utility at global scope. Oh, no. So moving it didn't help, but I'll tell you what. Same deal as before. If we compile it twice, it's fine. So let's move this over where we can see it. Copy the release file into components. Well, I am kind of doing analog modeling in a sense. What do you mean? Do you mean like making digital representations of single capacitors and resistors and doing it that way? Because that's not a good way for this. It might be a good way of getting reference sounds, but then making the analog circuit is also a good way of getting reference sounds. Let's see, Airwindows, ZBandpass2, but this should sound like ZBandpass2. And it is a clone of ZBandpass. So now let's go and change this into the bandpass. And we're going to do that the same way that we've done the other ones. We're going to go to my code list and the AU, and then go and find the previous existing bandpass. You know what, I'm going to move this folder back to where it started, because it did not actually help. And now it's back to how the original one was. This stuff is all the same, except for that our new way of doing things is quite different from the previous way. But all things considered, this is the part we want to look at. Yeah, I mean, in some ways, technically, if I can make a plugin that sounds more like the real EMU E6400 from doing what I do than people do through analog modeling, I think I'm ahead of the game. I feel as if the calculations that you do in the digital domain detract from the sound enough, you must then rethink things as far as, let me see what we got here. You must rethink things as far as what you can do minimally in the digital domain to get various sounds. And it's not at all about doing a lot of processing to get every little resistor and capacitor behaving right, because there's also, remember how I did capacitor 2 and I found some behaviors in capacitors that were real world ones were getting a frequency modulation on their cutoff. Stuff like that, if you try to model it on the component by component level, you're going to be doing so much over processing. The only way through is to sort of do the nebula thing and go so far into the overprocessing that you come out the other side. So let's start doing this firstly. That's the H file. I don't want that. It's always useful to be able to identify stuff though, because like if you're doing this sort of thing and you basically need to have a characteristic in the sound, and you can identify it as the cutoff for this filter is fluctuating because the real one fluctuates. Rather than trying to do a circuit model, what you do is you try to mimic the result. you try to mimic the way that the frequency of the cutoff fluctuates, but you use digital techniques for doing the cutoff rather than trying to piece it together out of imaginary components. And you kind of balance those things out, and the purpose of doing the digital forms of things is to touch the audio with processing as minimally as possible. So it's all about trying to find new characteristics to identify. Oh, Heinbach did a gong? That's pretty cool. So let's see now, what have we got here? We've got some changes in these. The bandpass cuts off at 14K and adds 0.079. I do believe we can just take this directly. And clip factor is acting like this and is still part of our calculation. So rather than taking it from there, we're going to take it from here. And then strangely, our biquad is, the resonance is 0.314. I'm not really quite sure how I arrived at that, but that's how I got the sound of the original ZBandpass. Oh yeah, well Heinbach is in a relationship with plugin makers, no question about that. And it's a very smart alliance on their part, because whether or not people, and I'm going to pro tip not, the plugins that he is selling do not equal the test equipment that he's got from like vintage sources and so on. It's not. They're just plugins. But they are approximating stuff pretty nicely, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's very good marketing, because what he can do is he can make videos and show people the sound of the original equipment and then tell people, oh, the plugin does this. And then show it, and on YouTube it's not that easy to hear the difference between the real thing and the model is pretty close, and it gets the same basic tone color and so on and so forth. And because it's Heinbach, he is able to demonstrate the real thing in such a way to get your attention, and then sell you the plugin, which doesn't actually model the real thing, but does a good hard try at doing it. That's all I'm doing, is doing a good hard try at getting the sounds of these things. It's the same deal. So now let us do our filter, which is a bandpass, so it needs to have these changes. And I don't think I'm actually going to be changing the code. Oh yeah, no, Heinbach's voice is, "Hi, I'm Heinbach. It's good to have you back." Yeah, talk about catchphrases, man. One of the things that delighted me recently was I dropped by Unfa's stream, and he was reviewing Surge, and Surge has Airwindows stuff in it, and he was enjoying the reverbs. And I said, "Oh, hey man, I'm glad you like the reverbs. I'm enjoying your live stream. Good for you." And he was all excited and invited me to join his Discord, and I joined his Patreon because I thought he was doing really good work. And that got me access to his Discord as well. And I showed up, and they have emojis of me. The Unfa Discord has a Chris emoji. And the reason is because of my catchphrase, "Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and hey, you can do this." Because "hey, you can do this" is very Linux, and Unfa is all about the open source and free software world. And since I support that, they like me. So that was rather delightful. But it's like, you know, if you can come up with catchphrases like that, like the "Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and hey, you can do this," which is very intentional. I didn't hit that by accident. I was like, how can I sum up what I'm trying to do for people? And Heinbach, his catchphrase is, "It's good to have you back." and that's what he feels like. So yeah, it is all good. It is all ways of people connecting with each other and doing what they want to do. And let me also focus here on what the heck I'm trying to do with this, because biquad A2 needs to be k divided by biquad A1 plus norm. So we'll copy this, and then we're going to change it over to bikereso. And see there, those match now. And, space. And biquad A3, which is actually biquad AB1. After that thing times norm and so on, the next one is literally 0.0. You can leave that out. I don't think we're going to. I do not know Chad Blake. Although I have communicated with Tim Gillies at one point, and in fact I've also communicated with Eric Sarafin at one point. Neither of them really stuck. Tim moved to Tasmania, and although I would like very much to stay in touch with that guy, I kind of drifted apart, and Eric Sarafin really was mostly interested in whether I could do plugins where he could brand name them with his brand and then make up stuff, because he was a fan of Pressure. In fact, I'll be putting out a new version of Pressure pretty soon, and he may very well enjoy that as well. But here, let me see now. Let me finish these. Negative biquad A, that's biquad 4. 5 is not changing. 6 doesn't appear to be changing either. And then let me quickly peek over here and see whether any of the... This shouldn't, because this op-amp stuff is on the end of everything else, and so that shouldn't be changing from plugin to plugin, and indeed it is not. So I'm going to call that satisfactory, and then what have we got in trim? Is that different? No, it's not. And now let us, I think we already did build this just now. We'll close the original bandpass, and we should have a working ZBandpass after doing that. Let's find out if we do. And I'll use the new drum thing. Yeah, Dan Worrell is interesting. People have a tendency of telling people to go listen to Dan Worrell videos so that he can teach you about how digital audio works. And he's a pretty good mainstream viewpoint. He is not so much about the going into the weeds on how to get digital to really behave properly, which is fine. Let's see now, what have we got? Well, we got a nice smoothing. Oh yeah, there will be a new pressure. I think this works. Yep, we got a band pass. I think we got there. Tripping on my cable a little bit there. And again, these are my new drum loops. This is the kind of thing I would probably show up either on the MediaFire or perhaps SoundCloud, because I've got a number of thoughts as far as how this stuff goes, where I'm not really doing long jams that go directly onto SoundCloud anymore. And I'm contemplating like focusing in my recordings in such a way that I can produce distinct songs and have those become albums and have the albums be on Bandcamp rather than SoundCloud. I think if I play my cards right, I can make that happen. I certainly am quite motivated to do that. And if I make the source of this there's a variety of weird things in here. I'm not really good at the breakbeat as the guy from the Winstons, but that's understandable because he's amazing. But I can do a nice simple beat in such a way that you could loop it and have it be solid. And I got experiments. Like a different hat pattern. Places where you could put a drum fill in. That's me trying to do a steady drum beat, a double kick beat. I'm not very good at double kick, so there aren't really very many moments in there that would work, but tom rolls. The idea here is I'm just using everything that I can so that making little loops of stuff, you'd be able to get the tones you needed out of the drums. And you throw a little loop in on something. And then here we've got individual hits, which I will take and make into a little a collection for Bespoke, because the idea is you'd set these up on the Bespoke drum pads and then have the actual beats living in other drum pads. And so what you do is drag individual riffs that you were making out of the beats onto the drum pads, but then you'd have these sitting there waiting to be used in case you needed to fire a single hit to produce some kind of result. Like there's a gentle kick drum hit. So if you loop that, if you were making a groove out of just that one kick drum hit, you'd have something like that, but it would follow all the same rules as the more complicated loops, and you'd be able to throw it into your riff in such a way that you could overlay it, and that would work. Or you can do weird crap like this. There you go, an electro hit. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? There it is. And so there is a very unnatural drum hit. And using this kind of stuff in Bespoke means that you have an envelope that you can put on any drum thing in the drum sequencer, so that you could make any of your sounds do this. You could make the bass do this, you can make the snare do this. You expand it out a little bit. And just shape what the feel of your track is supposed to be, or slightly gated. That one actually has what appears to be a tom hit in there for some reason. So that's a little bit silly. And this is basically how you get riffs, is you take an extended sound of stereo that seems as if it's giving you good tones, and then you crop it in whatever personal way your song needs, and then trigger it at a suitable moment, like you start at, say, and if you synchronize this well enough, you'd get a fairly decent sort of groove going on. Let's see what else is in here. Okay, we're doing a little hesitation there, so if we include that snare, and then if we were looping this in a special way, we could do a ultra short snare hit. And there's a little groove that actually starts with a kick drum, so you'd be able to trigger this repeatedly and actually have a useful thing out of it. But you basically find stuff like this in a long extended, like this is just a moment in this whole loop session. And the idea is you kind of take that, and much like working with the amen break, only with a much longer period, you can generate all kinds of neat stuff out of something like this, because the bottom line is it's just a continuing attempt to do a continuous groove over a known track that happens to be exactly, it happens to be the amen break. Let's see what we've got here. Too fast. So the thing about something like this is if you took a groove that was actually a 5 and you overlaid it onto a 4, you can make it so that the pulsing nature of it seems normal, but the way you're triggering it is different. So rather than always triggering it at like this, the 4, what you'd be doing is coming up with a way of triggering it on the 1 and then triggering it on the 5 to resynchronize it, or just fussing with the length of the loop until it was right, and only re-triggering it when you need it to, meaning that you could have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And your regular riff would be in 4, but the underlying pulse is actually in 5, meaning that it will have variation that doesn't sound like it's a 4 loop. And that can be worth doing. You could overlay 2 different versions of it. For instance, if you took this bit and you also had a 3, and it was a different part that was supposed to be consistent, but it was a 3 and the other one was a 5, and maybe you had another one that was a 7, you'd wind up with a continuously looping thing that would probably be fairly tight, at least if you picked it out to be tight. But it would have interesting characteristics going on. That's just turned into a different groove. And there we've got a little hi-hat snip that gets cut off, so if we expand that, and now we've got a groove with a hesitation. 2, 3. And if I grab an instrument, like my hollow body here, oh, it's so out of tune. Yeah, so that funny little hiccup and groove, you can make all kinds of stuff out of that. This would probably be more suited to playing a bass over it, but it's all good. And that's kind of how you do things like this. This is kind of, you talk about King Crimson, you talk about wanting to make stuff like that happen, but sometimes it's simply about taking pieces of music that you're assembling and being able to hear what's happening, count it, and then just jam something with it. Like, you'll notice that my riff that I was playing over that had sort of two parts. And it was constructing it out of sort of two pieces that were slightly different lengths, but they were similar. So it was breaking it down into chunks, like how many counts do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. It's a 15. It's a 15/8. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 15 minus 7. Time to do math. So 15 minus 7 is 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can count it like that, meaning that your first part is in with the pulse, and then the second part is on the off beats, but then it wraps around again. Or you can count it with the pulse. So the 8 and then 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you could do that either way. You can construct a riff either way. One of the things that I was doing with the riff that I hit on at first was I was counting the initial part in 7 so that I could stagger it. Oh, let me grab the guitar again and I'll show you. I'll grab a different guitar. I think this one might actually be in tune. So if I count that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So hear how I'm alternating? But then if I do the 7 first, it's going. Let me wait until it comes around. And the on beat is going with the pulse initially, but then since I put the 7 first, it's emphasizing the pulse in two different places, and as a result, although it's doing a 7, although it's stepping aside from the rhythm, it's putting it in the middle of the cycle rather than at the end. Whereas if I put the 8 first, it stays with the pulse a lot more, but I didn't like it as much, and so I didn't go with that. The difference between this hang on, I just didn't play it right. That's more boring to me because it's doing the 8 and then the 7, but it's putting the 7 in a place where it just lines up with where the other one dislocates and goes into the 7. Whereas if I do it the other way, I'm trying to do continuing the strings while playing their other riff. It's a little too hard for me. So you can hear how the putting the 7 first, which is opposite for where the drum loop is doing it, makes it more interesting. And if I try to play chords, I immediately get lost. Something's wrong there. I can't place a chord on that snare hit. Something's losing me. Hard to play that. But yeah, this is what you can do. This is what you can do. I will finish off by picking some goofy riff and then immediately jamming on that, and then we'll call it a day. Okay, that's good fun. What happens if I stretch that out to here? code. This is just a dumb riff. This one's not working at all because it's goofy and it doesn't actually fit. So let's go and find other ones. That was just silly. And hello, normalcy. Or semi-normalcy, because I'm still going to be slightly off time. Like that, or including that grace note on the snare is nice. Also, notice this part. This demonstrates one of the things I was talking about. Check that out. Remember how I said that you want to sit the hat like behind the kick drum coming in, but you sometimes also want to have the hat in front of the snare, like your hat comes down and the snare is slower. That's what that looks like. hat here going into the snare. So this is a hesitated swung backbeat in here. And when you can play stuff like that, that second backbeat is in a much later pocket than the first one. We got sort of two different drum grooves in there. Because the hat is coming through very steadily. But the second snare drum is delayed a little bit. And that's what can give us a swung beat. Oh, Jess, I'll do my own SP1200, don't you worry about it. You go ahead and do your thing. If any of my code is useful, then by all means, run with it, credit it, because it's MIT licensed. Let's change this vibe around some more. Let's do a double hat. No, that sucks. So yeah, fooling around with grooves like that. There we go. So you can have that be another section, or again, still of our snare roll. Let's slip it in the middle of this bit. Oh, hello. Speed that one up a little bit. That's probably enough fun for now. I'm chasing people away like mad. I think that the moving this whole scene over to Twitch is probably going to be more suitable because it'll chase people away like mad, but other people will show up and it'll sort of ebb and flow. YouTube kind of just sort of ebbs. So we will see as far as what that kind of stuff is concerned. And things like this, I said things like this. Things like this can be yours through when I finally get the MN Loop Sessions audio out, because I'm going to make this file available so that other people can play with it too. Basically, all you do is just grab snippets and throw them together in interesting ways. Become your own drum and bass producer. Because there's the thing. I am not nearly a good enough drummer to be able to play this kind of stuff on command exactly the way that it's being done. I could play that little riff once, and I did. And then you edit it, and see what you get. Okay, that just became a really weird jam. So this little moment is a good groove. This is also a strong groove, although it's a really odd time. This is an equally weird groove, but then the stranger it gets, you can just put stuff together until it gets extremely silly. And that's almost Beefheart. That's getting very strange indeed. And then you keep finding little transient things in there. And that's, I mean, I shouldn't say Beefheart because we're talking basically Drumbo here. We're talking John French. He learned to be able to play things like that consistently, and that is really, oh man, viewers are running away like crazy. Yeah, so you can make really goofy music out of something like this because repetition legitimizes, and it could be disturbing to people, but then if you play guitars or basses over it and turn it into a little riff, all of a sudden you've got the proggiest, craziest thing because it's a mistake. The overall piece is from out of this. And you can kind of hear how it became this. And if you stretch it out even farther, you can feel how the groove just gets lost. But little isolated pieces of this stop being just failing to keep a groove, and you grab the little tiny snippets and they become something else. That's how this works. So we have the moments that are just a beat, and that sounds normal, whereas something like this does not. And it's sort of all the way that you work it, really. So I'm going to call that a successful build day for ZBandpass2, and I'll be working on making the VST plugin for this. And unless we decide to release something like Monitoring 2, which has dark, or Pressure 5, you'll be able to have ZBandpass2 pretty soon. And we'll just see how that goes. For now, I am going to bid the three of you good day. Maxed out at like, I don't even know how many, bunch of people. Well, if it sounds normal to you, you grew up the way that I did, I guess. And we'll put chat away. It'll be interesting to see whether Twitch chat is any busier. Again, we'll be resuming this on Twitch when I start getting that going. And I'm going to see how that works out. For the time being, I will bid you folks adieu. And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.